Hi, this is Mrs. Bustamante. We're continuing on energy conservation. So, some people think that there's some government involvement that needs to be included in making us a more sustainable energy users, right? Sometimes we call this the top-down approaches, or in what are some of those? Well, improving the availability of public transportation, right? If it's there, if it's easy to use, if it meets lots of people's needs, they're probably going to use it more, and we talked about how that's more efficient. Higher taxes to discourage excess use of things, rebates or tax credits, maybe when people change over to something that is more efficient, or when you are building a home or building some sort of device, giving people a reason, incentive to make it more sustainable, even if it's more expensive. And then a tiered rate system. So you would get charged different times of day based on your usage. High times, you get charged more. Low times, you might get charged less. So, something for us to think about is this idea of the phantom load, right? Um, so, that's really when we have devices plugged in. Maybe it goes into sleep or hibernate mode, but it's really because it's still plugged in, it's still drawing power. You're still using that power. Maybe not as much sometimes, uh, but even though it's just plugged in, it is getting access. So, what can we do about that? Well, we can unplug devices that we don't use as often. This probably won't work for everything that you use all the time, right? But maybe there's a TV or a stereo or some certain device that you don't use all the time. Just unplugging it completely until you need it next time can help you save energy. Power strips can also be a good tool because you can basically just turn them off and on, totally off and on, so they're not consuming electricity when you're not around. Curbing your idle time on devices such as computers, video games, right? Simply setting your computer to sleep mode or saving a game and powering it down instead of leaving it paused for a prolonged amount of time. And then making smart upgrades when it comes time to send your old devices to the graveyard, right? Something to consider is replacing them with what we call Energy Star devices. They tend to have lower standby consumption of energy, and the average device generally uses less in all their functions, saving you money overall. So, what are the benefits of conservation and efficiency? Many energy companies have extra backup source of energy to meet the peak demand, the greatest quantity of energy used at one time. My husband was actually talking to me that he said most things are planned for like average use, maybe medium use, but the power system is actually planned for peak use, which is kind of interesting. You could think of it like if all of a sudden you have some sort of pandemic that breaks out and your hospitals are going to have lots of patients, but they're not really prepared for that because they're not planning for the peak season. They are, but the power system kind of does that. They plan for the peak system, the peak demand, which is different than other things. You can have a variable price structure where utility companies pay less for energy use when demand is lowest and more during peak demand. And then our second law of thermodynamics, right? Energy is converted, and every time it gets converted, it loses some of that energy to unusable heat, right? So we could reduce, so for us to reduce our electricity use by 100 kilowatt hours, we may actually be conserving 300 kilowatt hours of our energy resource, such as coal. So, what does variable price structure mean? So, your parents, somebody pays probably a water bill, electricity bill, right? And sometimes you pay different rates. This bill is from California, so they pay different rates throughout the year, right? And then they pay different rates for like an initial amount. And then you'll notice every 10 kilowatt hours after that, they pay more, right? And then if they exceed that amount, even they pay a rate that's even higher, right? And you'll notice that the rates in the low season are less than the rates in the high season. So basically, you get charged for different amounts of uses and different times. Um, Some things to think about though, right? This can be affect different class structures in great ways, a big social issue, right? People who are pretty wealthy maybe can pay the extra money per time, but people who aren't as well off are gonna have to think about how they use their energy and when they use their energy, and maybe it affects them more than those wealthy individuals who don't have to worry about it so much. So maybe there are some things to consider about implementing price structure this way. So something else to note, right? It sometimes can vary by time of day, right? So it could be cheaper to use power at night or early in the morning. Maybe that means like, hey, I'm going to do my laundry at night, or I'm going to run my laundry in the morning, versus the middle of the day when everyone's trying to do everything at the same time. So it could also not just work seasonally, but throughout the day hours too.